Hi, I'm Phoebe de Vere, and this is a summary of one of the craziest literary feuds of all time, known to historians as the War of the Words. It took place during the Elizabethan period, during a time when people loved to use pseudonyms to publish pamphlets insulting one another. It actually felt a lot like modern-day Twitter. On the one side of the feud, you have Gabriel Harvey, and on the other, you have Edward de Vere, aka Shakespeare, writing under a bunch of different pseudonyms and sock puppets. As with all great literary feuds, the protagonists started off on friendly terms. Gabriel Harvey was a student who had received some patronage from de Vere throughout his scholarly career. However, in 1577, de Vere doesn't hire Gabriel Harvey to be his personal secretary, leaving Harvey financially in the lurch. This stung Harvey, and though the two men remained cordial, Harvey made a speech in front of Queen Elizabeth in 1578 that made a slight jab at de Vere, implying that he spent too much time using his bloodless pen, and maybe he ought to pick up a sword sometime. The next year, Harvey writes a letter to his friend Edmund Spenser, the famous author of The Faerie Queene, complaining that there have been parodies around town of the speech that he made and that he's been made fun of at the playhouses. He doesn't specify who's behind it, but we can speculate based on his next move. In 1580, Harvey publishes a poem called Speculum Tuscanismi, mocking de Vere for adopting Italianate mannerisms and being generally bookish and effeminate. Harvey published this poem alongside his personal correspondence with Edmund Spenser, sharing letters in which Spenser and Harvey had been talking about de Vere behind his back. Spenser was a very respected poet as well as a personal friend of de Vere's, so this was a major flex by Harvey. Harvey essentially claimed to have been hacked, saying that he didn't publish the letters and he didn't know who did, but de Vere was unconvinced. De Vere retaliated by staging a play called Pedantius at Trinity College, mocking Harvey. This public shaming of Harvey cost him a prestigious position at Cambridge, delivering a blow to his career prospects from which he would never recover. Perhaps feeling guilty, de Vere offered qualified praise of Harvey, crediting Harvey as carrying on in the tradition of Homer. However, Harvey rejected this peace offering. Months later, an anonymous address penned by Gabriel Harvey and his brother Richard mocked de Vere for having the presumption to pass judgment on other writers. Additionally, they pointedly referenced de Vere's practice of using anonymous sock puppets to publish his writings. Gabriel's brother Richard Harvey then published another pamphlet insulting de Vere, calling him a liar and a lewd customer. Richard Harvey had embarrassed himself recently with the publication of a woefully incorrect list of astrological predictions. De Vere shot back at Richard with a satirical pamphlet featuring ludicrous astrological predictions of his own, signed Adam Foulweather, student of astronomy. De Vere then published an additional parody by Simon Smelnave called Fearful and Lamentable Effects of Two Dangerous Comets. Both Harvey and de Vere were in bad shape in the early 1590s and eager to vent their frustrations. By 1592, de Vere had completed the process of selling off all of his inherited ancestral estates for cash and was reduced to borrowing money from his servants. Harvey was similarly destitute, thanks in no small part to de Vere sabotaging his career. The feud was about to escalate. In the summer of 1592, de Vere published A Quip for an Upstart Courtier under his pseudonym Robert Greene. Greene broadened the scope of the pamphlet war with a passage in which he has Harvey's own father berate his sons. De Vere has Mr. Harvey insult each son in turn, calling them the limb of the devil, a vain, glorious ass, and a fool. Gabriel Harvey was understandably furious by de Vere's attack on his father and brothers. He responded by threatening to sue de Vere for libel and expose him as the author behind Robert Greene. De Vere responds by killing off the character of Robert Greene in a series of 3 lengthy pamphlets, all supposedly published on Robert Greene's deathbed at the instant of his death. De Vere is pretty pleased with his cheeky maneuver and gloats about evading Harvey's libel lawsuit. He also threatens to put on a play in which he would hire Will Kemp, a famous clown, to act as Harvey's father. What could Harvey do with this powerful earl anonymously threatening to hire a clown to mock his father? Like any good improviser, Harvey decided to say yes and, publishing a response pamphlet eulogizing Robert Greene, in which he mercilessly satirized de Vere's lack of funds, his infidelity to his wife, and his status as a social pariah. Harvey writes a heartbreaking tale describing how he witnessed Greene's tragic deathbed scene. He claims Greene died of a surfeit of pickled herring, a colloquial phrase similar to saying he died of too much bologna. Harvey claims that Greene was buried next to Bedlam Insane Asylum and that he had a bastard son named Infortunatus with a prostitute who was the sister of a notorious cutpurse named Cutting Ball. He claims that his final letter to his wife was asking her to pay his laundry bill. Harvey also gives de Vere a new nickname, Pierce Penniless. Harvey finishes off by including a poem written in his defense by the famous poet Edmund Spenser, de Vere's friend. Perhaps it is this coup de grace which gets under de Vere's skin the most because de Vere scrambles to do damage control. He asks his friend Thomas Watson to write a eulogy celebrating Robert Greene, but unfortunately Watson dies days later, leaving Greene unmourned. De Vere is forced to write eulogies for Robert Greene himself, publishing them under other sock puppet pseudonyms such as BR and RB Gentleman. In Greene's news from both heaven and hell, BR claims to have been visited by Robert Greene's ghost with a plea for revenge against Harvey. De Vere also publishes a eulogy as Henry Chettle, who states for the record that Robert Greene was very handsome. Harvey and De Vere will continue to attack one another in the press for years to come, until the Archbishop of Canterbury decides to shut them down. The craziest part of this whole saga is that modern-day scholars have completely misunderstood this famous war of words. Mainstream scholarship holds that Robert Greene was a real person who did tragically die in poverty from eating too much pickled herring with his bastard son Infortunatus. Poor Gabriel Harvey has been remembered by academics as a brutally insensitive lout who danced on a dead man's grave. Modern scholars say, "The virulence of Harvey fills me with disgust at his attempt to deface the monument of the dead. Harvey sits like a vampire on Greene's grave, sucking blood from his corpse." Greene had been but a short time in his grave when the pen of Gabriel Harvey endeavored to blacken his memory in a work, the fierce malignity of which has thrown an indelible stain upon the character of its author. Robert Greene's Wikipedia page shows this woodcut from 1598 as his author's portrait. This comedic portrayal shows Greene wearing his funeral shroud, but still writing away at his desk. His facial features resemble Edward de Vere's, and the book on the table is de Vere's handsome Geneva Bible. Robert Greene, rest in peace. Thank you to Robert Prechter for his research. Go to oxfordsvoices.com to learn more about Robert Prechter's work, and read Oxford's Voices, What Shakespeare Wrote Before He Was Shakespeare, the complete canon of history's premier literary genius. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more about Edward de Vere and the Shakespeare authorship question, and follow me on TikTok at Phoebe de Vere.